Joker, the 2019 film directed by Todd Phillips, is often seen as a film about class struggle, mental illness, and even incel rage. What if I told you that the Joker is in fact queer? Based on the DC Comics villain of the same name, the film takes great liberties in its interpretation of the character, which is usually left undiscussed in many other filmic interpretations of the character. We follow Arthur Fleck, played by Joaquin Phoenix, a mentally ill professional clown who dreams of being a stand-up comedian, but he is disenfranchised by the system, he lives in poverty, but he ends up committing multiple murders that lead to a violent uprising by the people of Gotham against its elites. In this video essay, I will argue that the Joker, Arthur Fleck, is in fact queer. What I mean by that is going against the status quo, challenging the status quo, because of his identity, and that his fellow Gotham residents queer their society by celebrating the murders that Arthur commits, causing them to revolt against what is expected of them. This queered reading, through the use of queer theory, obviously, and cinematic techniques, we'll discuss the queerness of the Joker in its various filmic and comic book interpretations, before examining Arthur's laugh and dancing as an allegory for queerness, his alienation, and finally the clown uprising and their rejection of Gotham's hegemony. These aspects will uncover the queer themes in the film, and of the character of the Joker himself. This video essay is based off of a real essay I wrote at university, and I got an A in this essay, so you are legally not allowed to disagree with me. Sorry! This is a joke. I'm joking. Firstly, it is important to establish what I mean by queer or queering in a film theory sense, apart from its definition as an umbrella term for anyone who is not heterosexual, not cisgender. Benshoff writes, "Queer can be a narrative moment, or a performance or stance that negates the oppressive binarisms of the dominant hegemony. Queerness disrupts natural equilibrium and sets in motion a questioning of the status quo." Most vital in this video essay is this idea of queerness disturbing the status quo and the battle against hegemonic powers, themes that are significant in this analysis of the Joker. Joker, since its release in 2019, has gained a somewhat problematic fan base, you could possibly say, where many have identified with this loser, anti-hero characterization of the Joker. This has caused some to label the film as a toxic rallying cry for incels, and some even worried that the film could inspire similar violence. But this fear was fortunately never realised. Although this video essay will describe the Joker and his life experiences as queer, this is obviously not saying that queer people are dangerous, violent, or anything along those lines, but instead they all challenge the status quo of what society deems as right and wrong and moral and immoral. This polemic issue is also discussed by Benshoff, who I just quoted earlier, when discussing the queer identification with monsters in films. He writes, "What is the price paid in the culture at large for yet another depiction of monstrous predatory homosexuals? As some depictions of queer monsters undoubtedly conflate and reinforce certain sexist or homophobic fears within the public sphere. This issue clearly goes back years, and likely began with queer identities having to be explored subtly due to various government codes and various forms of media, and this censorship and queer-coded characters is very relevant to the Joker, as this kind of government code extended to comic books. The Joker first appeared in the comic called Batman 1 in 1940, establishing him as the complete antithesis to Batman. Batman represents law and order, hegemony. He comes from one of the most wealthy families in Gotham, while the Joker represents chaos and violence, and is said to confront normativity, the societal requirement to conform to established behavioural expectations. This shows that even before Joaquin Phoenix's Joker was created, the character was already known for challenging the status quo. Before becoming the more dark and evil villain that we know today, the Joker was previously shown to be quite flamboyant in his demeanour. He wore makeup, he wore colourful clothes like his really iconic purple suit, and these actions go against the hegemonic expectations for men and how they should present. Even when many of these aspects were changed for this more gritty, realistic version of the Joker we saw in Nolan's trilogy, for example, Ledger's Joker was still described as camp, thanks to his stylized outfits extending to his physically embodied scars and the layer of makeup that highlights them. However, the most obvious queer description of the Joker comes from the late Neil Adams, a comic book writer who really made the Joker into this dark and gritty version we know today. As mentioned in a book called The Batman Files, Adams stated that the Joker was and always has been homosexual. This statement is a clear insight to how this character had been previously developed, and helps support the assessment of the Joker as a queer character in the 2019 film. There are two main aspects in the film that can be interpreted as queer experiences, as symbolism for queer experiences, I should say. The first of which is Arthur's stress-induced laughing condition, which I think can be seen as an allegory for homosexuality. It's obvious in the film that Arthur is mentally ill. We see him speak to a therapist, he takes medication for something. Who knows? One of the neurological disorders that he has been diagnosed with is this laughing condition, where he bursts into laughter in stressful situations. This laughing causes unwanted attention and others to give him very judgmental looks. Most notably in the subway murder scene, where his laughing draws the attention of the white-collar workers, who then he eventually kills. Arthur also often coughs during these attacks, but it's unclear whether that is directly linked to the laughing, or I personally think it's him trying to hold it back, that he is having a negative reaction, trying to stifle his own laughter. As I said, I see Arthur's laughter as an allegory for queerness or homosexuality, specifically during the period when being gay was seen as a mental illness, and even more stigmatized by society than currently right now. We're literally regressing, guys. I'm shitting myself. His laugh is not causing himself or anyone else harm. It's just that other people have been socialized to judge him because we have this unspoken set of rules saying when it's appropriate to laugh and when it's not. His laughing outbursts are queering the expectations of when to have certain reactions. I think this parallels the treatment of gay people, because obviously two people of the same sex engaging in sexual or romantic relations is not hurting anyone. Literally not hurting anyone. It causes no harm to the participants or wider society. But because of the power of religion and heteronormativity, queer people were and continue to be ostracized. His laughing outbursts being labelled and pathologized also matches the treatment of homosexuality. The term homosexual was created in the late 19th century in order to criminalize and pathologize same-sex relations, previously only really being viewed as bad in a religious way, in a religious sense. But it then became like a scientific category akin to alcoholism or even insanity. One psychiatrist saying at this time that, for me, they are sick people requiring medical help. Still, though I have no bias, I would say homosexuals are essentially disagreeable people, regardless of their pleasant or unpleasant outward manner. This quote perfectly encapsulates the feelings of those witnessing Arthur's laugh, as they appear to dislike and feel uncomfortable about his outward manner. In other words, how he interacts with the world and exists. Most vitally for this queer reading is the statement that Arthur makes when talking to his mum in the hospital. Through the use of a handheld cam, a low angle, and a set piece blocking the right side of the frame, the viewer feels like they're sneakily watching this conversation, really alluding to its intimacy and emphasizing the profoundness of Arthur telling his mother how he views himself. He says,
He used to tell me that my laugh was a condition, that there was something wrong with me. There isn't. That's the real me.
This can be read as Arthur coming out to his mum. He's rejecting how his laugh has been pathologized and the way that his own mother labelled him. He is challenging the status quo directly to the person that he feels has othered him the most. Furthermore, dance is also used as a form of queer symbolism, specifically that of queer liberation. There are several dance scenes in the film. The first one taking place in Arthur's own apartment. The first scene is described as painfully awkward and the opposite of the confidence he displays later in the film. The person who wrote that quote I just quoted, quote, yes, what am I saying? Also notes the camera work, which frames him from deliberately awkward angles. A close-up shot under his face that highlights every crease and furrow. A medium shot of his bony torso that emphasizes his physical frailty. I can speak. These two contrasting settings are vital in understanding his dance as queer liberation, since they display the drastic increase in Arthur's confidence throughout the film. Arthur uses dance as a form of self-expression and as an emotional outlet as he is forced to put on a mask out in public, and he feels he can finally be himself in a private space, like his living room or a bathroom. One person wrote, "He's very relaxed when staying in his dim and small apartment. The demeanour at home suggests Arthur feels safe and removes camouflage. The private zone offers him a sense of protection." His movement can be seen as this Joker alter ego, finally taking control of his body. However, I think the Joker is not separate from Arthur. I think that the Joker persona is his true self. He is gaining confidence in our non-queer world, and only feels confident showing his true identity, the Joker, at the end of the film, after obviously a lot of character development. The film's sequel, which I liked, but I don't think other people did. This sequel does delve more into this question of what is Joker, what is Arthur, but it's still not obvious. It's still really left up to the viewer's own interpretation. And now I will discuss how, because of Arthur's mental illness, challenging the status quo and being queer, He is alienated from society and essentially punished for differing from societal expectations. The audience can see how others abandon and exclude him through cinematic techniques and narrative, and these instances will now be analysed through a queer lens. In an investigation about this very topic, the researchers mentioned a variety of shots that demonstrate Arthur's isolation. The opening scene is firstly cited, where Arthur and his co-workers are putting on clown makeup. For work, obviously, they're clowns. And they're sat in a dimly lit room. Arthur's alienation is shown through his placement in this scene, being sat away from his own peers. The director, quote, uses a very long shot to make the social distance a public one, where the interactive participants and Arthur are completely strangers at this moment. Moreover, the audience sees Arthur's own desire for this to change, as he fantasizes about being accepted and admired on The Murray Franklin Show. This scene shows us how he believes he should be treated, in great contrast to how he's actually perceived and treated in real life. These scenes and the film itself portray Arthur as othered, even before the audience learns anything about his mental state. This positioning represents queer individuals who are excluded from society because they do not conform to its patriarchal heteronormative ways. Heteronormative? That's how you say it. Judith Butler, who is a well-known queer studies scholar, wrote in their essay on gender performance, performing one's gender wrong initiates a set of punishments, both obvious and indirect. And this is seen in Arthur, who suffers the consequences of not fitting in, not only because of his mental state, but also because of his gender performance. He queers the gender roles imposed upon him by society, and is chastised for it. For example, he wears makeup for his job, but his line of work is not respected, and he's beaten up twice in costume. He is the primary caregiver in his household, looking after his ill mother, which he fantasizes being admired for, and his body is skinny and frail, challenging this masculine expectation to be physically strong. Although in this film his gender is not brought into question, he is still bullied for not conforming, further proving the queerness of Joker. Not only is Arthur alienated because of his mental state and his queering of masculinity, but also because of the poverty he experiences. Gotham, which is usually described as a stand-in for New York City, is a deeply unequal society, where social mobility appears to be near impossible, as represented by the gate that leads into the Wayne estate. Bruce Wayne, who the audience knows will eventually become Batman, represents hegemony and wealth, while Arthur, who becomes the Joker, represents chaos and the lower class. And this scene also demonstrates the hostility between these two groups, which we will now look at. So the catalyst for this violent uprising in Gotham is the murder of the 4 white-collar workers in the subway by Arthur, who shoots them after they start attacking him. What is clear from the clown uprising that follows is that the people of Gotham are angry and reject the system that they live under. In her book on queer phenomenology, Ahmed states, "To make things queer is certainly to disrupt the order of things. And that is certainly what the people of Gotham do. They do not present another way of living. They simply cause destruction and disrupt the city's day-to-day life and infrastructure. They have gained class consciousness, realizing that these hegemonic powers do not respect them and do not serve them. So they use the murders and the Joker as a symbol of the rejection of the status quo, which only bolsters the wealthy in Gotham." With a queer reading, this clown uprising can be seen as a form of queer liberation. Not only are the participants rejecting their financial situations, but also the roles in society forced upon them. The choice of the clown as a symbol for their uprising can also be seen as queer. The humour of the clown is a way to point out the stupidity and silliness of capitalist, patriarchal, heteronormative society. But notably, it's also a reclaimed symbol and label. During a TV broadcast, Thomas Wayne, who comes from the most wealthy families of Gotham, Thomas Wayne, Bruce Wayne, the Waynes, exclaims that those protesting are clowns. And this causes the uprising to latch onto the clown symbol even more. With the additional use of the masks, they become what the upper class of Gotham declare they despise. This is much like how queer people have reclaimed the word queer, since historically it was used in a derogatory way as a way to insult, and to other people who deviated from society, formerly being defined as strange, odd, of questionable character, suspicious, dubious, etc. Both the people of Gotham and queer people have taken what was used to degrade them and used it to define the resistance to the status quo. Joker is a film about breaking expectations, societies, the audiences, and even Arthur's. Through a queer reading, we see that its themes of alienation, defiance, and transformation extend beyond the character's own personal struggles into a broader rejection of imposed norms. Arthur's laugh, once a perceived marker of his illness, becomes a symbol of defiance. His dancing, initially awkward and private, transforms into a powerful expression of liberation. The clown uprising, which is a reaction to systemic oppression, mirrors the historical and ongoing resistance of queer communities, reclaiming the very labels used against them. Joker's queerness is not about sexuality, but about subversion, of roles, of expectations, of power. In embracing his own chaos, Arthur refuses to conform, and in doing so, he queers Gotham itself. Whether as a villain, an anti-hero, or something else entirely, he embodies the ultimate disruption of the status quo.